Welcome, Notre Dame fans, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We're going to make this real quick because we are going to go live here for the Rico Flores announcement, where he is going to decide to play college football, and he is a wide receiver in the 2023 class. And
from
Brian,
Folsom, California.
This is a big deal.
Rico is going to go live on Instagram, so when he starts talking, we will go right to him, so we won't have to deal with the CBS Sports introductions and awkward interviews and all that.
True.
So we will go live as soon as Rico starts talking. This has been an interesting recruitment event. It's going to come down to Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Georgia are the three finalists. He visited all of those schools at one point in time. Notre Dame, I believe, was his most recent visit for the officials. We like where Notre Dame is going into this, obviously, but we're going to let him make the final decision. But this is an important decision for Notre Dame, right? Because they got a great start at receiver. The board's looking good, but at some point in time, they've got to start closing on these guys, right, Vince, and start getting some of these guys in the class. And
no doubt,
Rico Flores is a very important piece to that puzzle, right? And then because look, the reality is, Vince, they have kind of put all their eggs in sort of a basket of three guys at receiver right now. Well, four guys, and they need to get three of them, so they got to hit 3 out of 4.
Absolutely,
and that's kind of where we are. So once Rico makes his announcement, obviously we'll talk about what that means for Notre Dame and where they go from here, either positively or negatively. And we'll dive into just a lot of different aspects of this, of course, depending on which direction it's going to go. I think we all feel good about the direction it's going to go.
Sure.
But don't want to say too much until Rico gets a chance to announce and make his decision known. But this is one where Notre Dame has had to battle back, Vince. It's kind of like that horse race where, you kind of trail the whole time, and then you hope that you can kind of pull ahead on that last lap.
Right, absolutely. And the backstory is always the fun part for me. I love hearing about, all the different steps that it took. And this one, which definitely had its ebbs and flows to it. And I will be honest, obviously, everybody loves recruiting. One of my assistant coaches at Riley is a huge Rico Flores fan, and he's the one that told me about Rico Flores first. He's like, I really like this guy. You got to really look at him, and he's like that. He's kind of my dark horse to be in the class and all this stuff. And so I was like, okay, I'll check him out. And he's right. I mean, this kid. I mean, look at his offer list. That pretty much tells you everything that you need to know about him as a receiver,
including the fact he has an offer from Yale. Right? Like,
absolutely.
Think about this. This is the second 4-star, top 100-ish caliber player that Notre Dame has landed that has an Ivy League offer. And Micah Bell had an offer from Harvard, and Rico Flores has an offer from Yale. So if Notre Dame is able to get Rico, you know what I mean? Like that would be the second announcement is what I should say.
Yeah.
So that's a big pickup for Notre Dame if they're able to get it done. And like I said, we'll get into the backstory here a little bit, but the interesting thing too, Vince, is part of the reason Notre Dame had to come from behind on this one was because they had never been able to get him on campus before. And his official visit in June. And there was a lot of people that thought, if they're, that was going to be the key, right? Getting him on campus, because a lot of people that I knew thought that he was a good fit for Notre Dame in a lot of ways. And his mom was very intrigued by Notre Dame. And here we go.
For everything he has blessed me with in life. I'd like to thank my mother for being there for everything. She had me at a young age. She didn't have to stay. She could have dropped me off somewhere and never came back, but she didn't. She stuck by my side and was more than just my mother. She had to pick up for the father role also. Next, I'd like to thank Lim and Bree for being there for me and showing me different aspects of life. They allowed me to see that there's actually more to life. I couldn't thank Lim enough for helping me build my skills each and every week, ever since I was a pup in the 2nd grade. I'd like to thank all of my past and present coaches, and also I'd like to thank the rest of my family and friends that stayed loyal to me throughout my life. Rest in peace to the ones that aren't here physically with us to celebrate this moment. I love y'all past death. Lastly, I just want to say to everyone that is going through a struggle, don't give up. Use your struggle as your motivation and trust that God has you. With all of that being said, happy birthday, Uncle Bash. I love and miss you. I know you will be excited to know that I'm spending my next 3-4 years at the University of Notre Dame.
Thought he picked up an IV hat there for a second.
Does kind of look like it.
You're going to get a dominant receiver for sure in all aspects, route running, catching, and just dominating the field as a whole for sure.
He's getting asked some questions
It was a perfect fit for me, I'll say, for life after football and life on football. So I feel like it's not a 4-year plan, it's a forever plan.
Obviously, we can't hear the questions. We got to hear his answers.
Thank you.
So there we go. So that is it, Vince.
Yes.
Notre Dame has picked up a commitment from Rico Flores, a 4-star wide receiver. A little bit of a kind of a look at Rico. He is a consensus 4-star recruit. He is ranked by 3 of the 4 services that currently have rankings out in the 200s, like kind of 214 to 260 something range. Rivals has him as the number 106 player in the country. I kind of have him in the middle of those two. You know, I don't have him as low as like 230, 250, 260. I don't have him quite as high as 106, but he's kind of right in that middle range. And sure, like I said, really good football player. The backstory, Vince, is interesting. So
yes, please.
For a long time, this was Ohio State's kid to lose, essentially. And Notre Dame was this, I mean, for months, it was basically just Notre Dame trying to hang around until they could get him on campus. The fear was for a while that he was going to commit before he made his June visit to Notre Dame, because he didn't come out and visit Notre Dame in the spring. He did go see Ohio State and Georgia in the spring. And so that was an interesting kind of scenario, and it kind of showed you where Notre Dame was in his recruitment. He made spring visits, and Notre Dame didn't get one. But they kept battling. And then the last open period when Notre Dame was able to get on the road, he was one of the first guys that Notre Dame went and saw. Chancey Stuckey went and saw him. Tommy Rees went and saw him. Other coaches, other people went and saw him. Like, this was one where Notre Dame clearly was putting the full court press on him and just trying to hang in the game. And then when he announced that he was going to decide in July, that was sort of like okay, we weathered the first storm thing from the Notre Dame staff. And then they just kept battling with the hope that Ohio State, honestly, the hope was that they would fill up. I mean, that's what they were hoping for.
Right, exactly.
And then it fill up before he visited. Now, what happened is Ohio State had not filled up in June yet. And so what Notre Dame had done is they were able to get to the point where Rico was going to take his visits no matter what. And as Ohio State kind of started to fill up, and they got obviously they got Carnell Tate, they ended up getting Brandon Ennis and Bill Rogers and filling up. But before that, Notre Dame was able to get him on campus. And what we had said, what Ryan and I had reported in the past on this, Vince, was that visit was a game changer for Notre Dame and Rico Flores. And as I said, that was the first time that I ever thought that Notre Dame might actually be able to get him no matter what happens with Ohio State. Because up until then, it was you're only going to get him if Ohio State cancels. Now, Georgia canceled his visit as well. He was supposed to visit Georgia. He went to Notre Dame the weekend of the 10th. Supposed to visit Georgia the next weekend, and then Ohio State the final weekend. Georgia canceled, in my opinion, and based on some things some people I've talked to, Georgia's visit was more of a we know we're not getting them, so let's save face a little bit. Let's act like we bowed out, because they're still. I mean,
Notre Dame knows how to do that. They've done that in the past.
Yeah. Well, this was more of a good strategic bow out. Like Notre Dame would do it when they, like a little bit differently, but this was more of a saving face thing.
Gotcha.
Where they could then go tell other recruits they were still in on. No, we bowed out because you're our guy.
You're right.
Kind of thing, which is actually smart recruiting strategy if you know you're not getting a kid. So actually, mine is more of a props to Georgia as opposed to this is how you do it all the time and it's lame. The way that Notre Dame had done in the past. So it was actually smart because you're not going to get them, because Georgia's still reaching out to new receiver recruits. So it's not like they're full. They got one receiver recruit in the class. I think they're going to get Tyler Williams. I think they lead for him, but they have a big need there because they lost a lot and not signed a ton of guys. So it was really, could you beat Ohio State? So his mom came with him on the visit, and his mom is super into the academic aspect of it, right? Like, she is the one that's really into doing things right off the field and making sure that you're staying out of trouble and you're getting your work done and all those kind of things. And so she was sold. Notre Dame is kind of where she wanted him to be after that visit. Like, what she liked Notre Dame and what it stood for, but again, she hadn't been on campus yet. When she got a chance to meet Coach Freeman and meet Coach Stuckey and see the kind of people they were, She wanted him at Notre Dame. However, she also wasn't going to push him to Notre Dame, which was important. But his connecting with the other kids on campus, I believe CJ Carr was on campus a weekend. He was there. Braylon James was on campus. There's pictures of Braylon and Rico and CJ Carr in a picture together from that. You know, Braylon really ramped up his attempt to recruit Rico into the class. And so that was a big needle mover for Notre Dame. But so then at that point, to me, it was neck and neck at that point in time between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Then Ohio State filled up. And it was like, okay, once that happened, it was a done deal.
Yeah.
And so once they got Noah Rogers, it was over. And so he ended up not making his visit to Ohio State that following weekend. And this is kind of, we had expected this at that time, that this was going to be the case. So that's a little bit of the backstory about how Notre Dame got Rico Flores. But the reality is at this point in time, I don't care how they got him.
Right.
They just needed to get him.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, this is a good football player. And, you know, he adds value, continued value to the class. And when you look at that, Notre Dame had the number 1 ranked class. So ESPN actually updated their rankings yesterday, and Notre Dame was still number 1. And then 247s obviously is Notre Dame got Charles Jagasaw, even with Ohio State getting a couple kids. Once Notre Dame got Jagasaw, Micah Bell, they moved ahead of Ohio State on the 247 rankings before Rico committed. They were still number 2 in Rivals. This jumps them ahead of Ohio State in Rivals. So Notre Dame is back to having the consensus. Well, I don't know what On3 does. Their rankings are so weird. But at least as far as the ones that make sense, I should say, Notre Dame is back to, actually they're back to number 1 on 3 as well, on the On3 consensus ranking.
Have they updated with Flores as a
they
commit?
Just up? Yeah, because I checked this morning and that Notre Dame was still number 2 behind Ohio State. So they just updated. They now have 18 commits in the class. They're number 2 on On3's overall their own ranking, but they're number 1 on the consensus ranking. So I believe, I don't know, I honestly don't know how they calculate their score. It's the weirdest thing ever, but it is what it is. So this is a big one for Notre Dame, Vince, obviously being able to get Rico Flores into the class.
And getting him in, obviously they you know, vaults them to number 1 across the board, but at the same time, how does this recruitment and this commitment affect the class as a whole? Because this is Notre Dame's second wide receiver commit, right? There's obviously guys still on the board, but what does this do for, you know, the wide receiving core and then the class as a whole?
It gets them halfway there, essentially.
Right.
You know, that's the key is Notre Dame needs 4. That's their need. They would get to 5 with the right kid, but I don't see that happening right now. I think they could maybe, you know, try to flip some guys during the season, but right now there's essentially 3 guys on the board. Micah Tease commits tomorrow, as we've said before. That's as of right now, that's not going to end in Notre Dame's favor. And then there's Ronan Hannafin and Jaden Greathouse, which we'll get to. But this to me checks several boxes for Notre Dame and Vince. And obviously, why are we here where Notre Dame needs 4 receivers? Well, there's no receivers left on the roster from the 19 or 20 classes. The only guys left on the roster from those classes play DB now.
Right.
Cam Hart and Xavier Watts.
Yeah, and corner.
Right. And so no receiver.
Recruit.
Played receiver as a freshman at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So you have Cam Hart, Xavier Watts, 19 and 20. Kendall Abdur-Rahman transferred. Jordan Johnson transferred. Jay Brunell transferred. You have the strong 2021 class, which is Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Stiles, Jaden Thomas. And then, of course, last year's class, you had a stud in Tobias Merriweather, but then you lost Amorian Walker and CJ Williams really heading into signing day. So you only signed 1 in a year where you needed 3. So after this 2022 football season, Vince, Notre Dame is only going to return 4 scholarship wide receivers. So if you think the depth chart now is a problem, wait till next year. Now, the talent will be really good, but it's going to be young. So they came into this class really with 3 big needs at receiver. Number 1 was just pure numbers, right? Like they need 4.
Absolutely.
If you can get to 8 scholarship players next year, that gives you 1 more than you have this year. When I mean scholarship, I'm talking about guys that were recruited as scholarship players. So like not like, and this is no disrespect to Matt Salerno, and it won't be any disrespect to Connor Radigan if it's just a different type of thing, right? Good football players, a different type of deal. So they would have 1 more, but of course they'll be young. So it gives you that. And then number 2 is, okay, it's nice to have numbers, but do you have guys that can play? So the other part of this whole conversation was on top of just the numbers, the minimum 4, you also needed to make sure you were getting players with either high floors and or high ceilings. Rico tying into the third piece, the reason you need at least one or two guys that have high floors, Vince, because high floor guy equals what? You can play early. You have a higher floor, which means you're a little bit more polished, or you're maybe a little bigger. You have things that are going to kind of help you make a transition. We don't know how good you're going to be when it's all said and done, but we know you can at least be this, right? And to me, Rico was one of those guys. And we'll kind of, as we did a film breakdown the other day, so we're not going to do another full film breakdown, Vince, but what we are going to do is, as we're kind of talking about the class impact and his fit, we'll just have his film going. So people that didn't see the film breakdown the other day will have a chance to see what we're talking about. And we can kind of point out some of those things as we're watching. But the thing about Rico that stands out, Vince, and I'd be curious to kind of see your thoughts, because you weren't with us on the film breakdown the other day. Sure. The reason that this pickup is important, even though he doesn't have the ceiling of the other players, is Rico might have as high of a floor of any player in this class not named Jaden Greathouse on the board for Notre Dame this entire time. I'd say Rico, Cardinal Tate, and Jaden Greathouse are the three kids that had the highest floors of all the receivers on the board for Notre Dame, because he's about as polished of a route runner as you're going to see as a junior in high school.
Yes, I agree. And I was going to, what I had, because I took notes on him today specifically, because I had watched this film before, but it was more like, hey, what is this guy about? That kind of a thing. So I actually took some notes today. And one of the things that stood out to me is the top of his routes are much more crisp than your average, junior wide receiver. You know what I mean? He does a really good job of stemming and of, breaking down and all of those things at the top of his route. That jumped off the film to me, right? I think he's a really good route runner. Rarely are guys pressing him because he's fast, right? So they're going to be off of him. So his moves to get around, they're speed moves, right? They're not get off the line moves, they're speed moves. And I think he does a really good job with that. And so an area where he can work on is when he actually gets pressed, because he's going to be working against faster corners in college. Duh, obviously. So he's going to have to work on that. But his speed moves en route are actually really, really good. And he's able to get past DBs very consistently with his moves. It's very, very impressive.
Right.
Another thing I love about him is he is a willing blocker.
Yes.
And you will hear me say that a lot about the two committed guys at Notre Dame and the guys that are still on the board for Notre Dame. That is consistent. They are willing to block.
And you talk about like that work at the line, Vince. This play right here is an example of why I like this kid as a player. Let's go back to this little slant route. He understands. I mean, he's going to have to improve for a college, but he understands like that outside stem right there. That's an advanced move right there, right? Like the guy's playing outside leverage. So what that means is if he just releases upfield and inside, that guy is going to squeeze because he's a cover two corner. That guy's going to squeeze hard on him until he has a flat threat, and then he's going to break off in the flats. Well, there was no flat threat coming, which means he just would have been all over Rico. When a corner is playing you in a certain direction, essentially he's trying to take one part away. And on this particular play, this corner is playing outside leverage, which means he's protecting outside.
Right. He doesn't
because
want
look at where the safety is. He knows I have no help outside. I am the outside vertical defender in this particular instance initially, right? Because the safety is going to have a lot more ground to cover. So you want to try to protect as much as you can. And so you want to try to get this guy to slip inside. Well, slant routes and quick in cuts like that are super easy to defend if a guy's playing outside and we just release inside. So what he does is he threatens the part that this kid is protecting. Rico threatens it.
Yes.
And so what that does is that it allows him to widen that guy, stretch that guy out, get separation, but then it also creates separation between Rico and the inside slot defender or slot receiver. And so that's just such a really nuanced play. And it may not look sexy and flashy, but that's just an example of a kid that really knows how to play the game of football. And you need that to play as a freshman, unless you are just a freak physically. And so Rico's not a freak physically. He's got good size. He's 6'1", 190. The thing I wrote in my evaluation is there's nothing elite about him athletically. He's not an elite athlete. He's not an elite, he's not an elite speed guy. He's not an elite jumper. He's just good, solid player all around athletically. So if you're not huge and you're not like an elite athlete, then you better be really advanced in regards to how to play the game. And that's what I love about Rico is this kid can come in and help you right away because he's willing to play. And what's the one thing, Vince, that could keep a young, polished kid as a route runner and pass catcher from playing as a freshman? Blocking.
Yes.
And that's where what you talked about comes into play.
Yes, he is. He's a willing blocker, and he has a whole if I remember right, he's got a whole line of blocking plays that he has after his receiving plays. He kind of broke it up like, okay, here's all my catches, here's all my blocks, and he's a willing blocker, man. I'll tell you what, and it's fun to watch. And I think one of the great things about him that I really like is I think he's the most versatile of the wide receiver group that they're recruiting. And what I mean by that is I think he could play outside, right? He could play the outside field position and be successful. He could play in the slot and be successful. I think you could move him around a lot depending on what needs are. And when we're talking about a wide receiver room that doesn't have a ton of depth, right? They're still working on getting that depth back. And when he's a freshman, they're still going to be working on getting that depth back, right? So the more versatile you can be, the better off you're going to be from a depth standpoint. And I think he strikes me as somebody who could cross-train at both of those positions.
Yeah, I mean, really all three. I mean, depending on how Notre Dame uses their boundary, I think he could even play into the boundary, to be honest with you, because he is a kid that, because of that route running ability, and he is, like you said, Vince, he's a strong kid. Like for a junior, he's a strong kid. He'll compete. His strength, you see it as a blocker. You see it when he's playing defense. I love the fact that he plays defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because it shows me a toughness. It shows me that he has had to defend route receivers, which tells me, he has to think about the game from the opposite point of view, which I always like. I'm always a big fan of that. So there's just a lot of positives to this recruitment, Vince, and the fit. And so as we kind of transition from the class impact into his Notre Dame fit, as you talked about, I think that's another piece to this as well, because in these two things tie together, the impact and the fit, in that you're not landing just a kid that can help you at X, a kid that can help you at Z, or a kid that can help you at W. The more kids that you land, here's a clip of him playing defense, the more kids that you can land that can play a lot of different places, especially the high ceiling guy or high floor guys, the better it is. Because let's say you're good at X. And let's say, because I think X is the ideal position for Rico. Like if I was planning an offense and I was going to build it around Rico, he's an X for me. He's a good route runner. He can block. There's a lot of things he brings to the table. But let's say I'm set at X. I got Tobias Merriweather. I got Braylon James. Let's say I'm going to play those guys at X. Or, if they're able to get a couple other guys. Or let's say, hey, I really want to play Lorenzo Styles at X. And you just feel really comfortable with your X thing. That's okay. He can help me other places too. And I think that's a really important part to getting a kid like Rico Flores, is because that versatility is so important. But he doesn't have the ceiling of a Braylon James. But the fact is that he can come in and who he is going to be the day he steps foot on campus.
Absolutely.
That is an important piece. Somebody asked how tall he was. He's listed between 6'1" and 6'2". He looks a lot closer to 6'1", 6'5", 6'1" to me. I don't see him as the 6'2", but he's a good football player. He plays quality competition, not all the time, but they played De La Salle twice last year. He had over 8 catches for over 100. I think it was like 100. I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head. I'm looking up as I'm saying this, but I think he had like 113 yards receiving and on 8 catches against De La Salle, which is a national powerhouse, home of Cooper Flanagan, who's a Notre Dame commit.
These are the blocking, by the way, the blocking clips.
It was 817 yards. Excuse me. I was incorrect on that. So that's, again, Vince, that's kind of what I like. And then, as a sophomore, he had a really interesting sophomore season too, Vince, because the fact that they canceled the season, the fall season, he didn't get a chance to play till the spring. So only played 6 games as a sophomore. But he caught 31 passes for 606 yards and 10 touchdowns as a sophomore, which doesn't look like great numbers until you realize he only played 6 games. And so, he's a really experienced kid, a really talented kid, and this is a very important pickup for Notre Dame.
Yes.
And when you look to rebuilding your depth chart, and you compare him to the current roster, the current class. Him and Braylon James are completely different players.
Yes.
Their strengths are different. Their body types are different. Their floors are different. Their ceilings are different. And Vince, what have I always said? I don't want a bunch of cookie cutters. I don't want a bunch of the same guy. Give me different skill sets. Give me different strengths, different weaknesses, areas where you can kind of bounce off each other.
And they can complement each other. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what I love about this group. And that's what I think that with these two now, with Rico and Braylon James, that's what you're getting. You're getting a really nice 1-2 punch to start this thing off. But as we'll get into later, you're not close to being done yet.
Well, and that's
close to being done yet.
I think that's one of the, you and I both coach wide receivers. I think that's one of the most fun parts of being a wide receiver coach is you can have such different skill sets and still be super effective at wide receiver. You know what I mean? And you can have different guys helping you in different ways and all these different things, and you get to coach all of them. You know what I mean? I love that about being a wide receiver coach. You can get a big, strong-bodied kid to do one thing, you get a little scat back kind of kid doing another thing, and they're just as effective as the other guy, just in a different way. And that's my favorite part about wide receiver coaching, and that is what they're building right now. They're having options at in their wide receiver room, and I think that is super important, especially when they're trying to basically rebuild the depth.
So what you have to understand too about this recruitment, Vince, was early on I wasn't sure how Notre Dame felt about Rico Flores, to be honest with you, because I couldn't really get anybody to kind of talk a lot about him. And then when I finally started to talk about him, like, you say, like, there might be some other players on the board that are more talented and that they felt that. But the reason he became such an important recruit, even when there was a lot of other players on the board still, so this wasn't like they turned to Rico because they had so many misses. That's not the case. They turned to Rico because I really felt the staff, the more they learned about him, they realized how he brought so many of those things to the table that we're talking about. It's the polish, the versatility, that he's a much different player than Ronan Hannafin. He's a different player than Jaden Greathouse. He's a different player than Micah Tease. He's a different player than Tyler Williams. He's a different player than Cardinal Tate. He's a different player than Braylon James. I'm just kind of going through all the different guys that have been on the board. Rodney Gallagher. He's a much different player than them, and I think that's what they started to like is this kid. This kid brings a unique skill set. He is, we were talking about this the other day. He projects as a really good, at the very least, a really good possession receiver at the next level.
Sure.
And that's kind of why, like, if the offense still looks like what it is going to look like under Tommy Rees, meaning if Tommy Rees is here for a while or they continue that offense, there's a lot of value in a slot receiver that just knows how to get open. And that's what I like about this kid too, Vince. He's got a very high football IQ. He knows how to get open. And I think that's an important piece of the sad too. And look, and I'll be honest, I liked him. I've always liked him, but I didn't love him at first. He was a kid that had to grow on me a little bit because he doesn't have a lot of those flashy tools. He doesn't have great size. He's not a burner. He's not like an electric make you miss kind of guy. He's not those things. But the more you watch him, like, man, this kid just knows how to play. And as you watch the NFL, those guys are the ones that are more so dominating the modern NFL than necessarily the guys who are the physical freaks. Now you're seeing some young players like Justin Jefferson and guys Chase Claypool who are, Jamar Chase, who are physical freaks. Those are guys that are starting to take over. But for a few years, I mean, it's the Devontae Adams types. It's the Cooper Kupp types who, are good athletes, but not elite athletes, but they just know how to play the game.
They're technicians, though. Level. And they understand the game and they understand how to get open. They're not necessarily going to run away from you, although Rico isn't slow. But they understand how to get open. There are a couple of clips in there also, if people want to go back and watch, where he's clearly not the first read, but he's able to find space, either whether it's the zone or whether it's just him getting away from the man-to-man that is on him. He finds a way to get open, and he helps his quarterback. He breaks off his route, and he finds a way to get open. Not everybody's good at that. Not everybody's good at, okay, well, I just ran the route I was supposed to run. Now I don't know what to do. There's a ton of guys out there like that. He shows the knowledge of the game at a very early age, in my opinion. And that's really, really important because you can build off of that.
So Ed has a comment. He says, I'll take a football player over an athlete any day of the week. And I think that's the challenge when it comes to putting together a recruiting class. Because you can't just have a bunch of guys that know how to play. Because then you're going to be really good, except when you play the teams that have really good athletes that also know how to play. And you can't just have a team filled with a bunch of athletes that don't know how to play. And that's kind of what we're getting back to earlier, because I love Ed's comment about, the premise of what he's saying. Like, give me a football player over an athlete any day of the week. Rico's no slouch as an athlete. Like you said, Vince, he's a good athlete. He's just not a great athlete, but there's value in a guy like that. So, he kind of, to me, he reminds me a lot of what CJ Williams brought to the table last year in the Notre Dame class. And CJ Williams is another guy that grew on me a little bit, and I eventually came to really like a lot. I think CJ has a little bit more room for maybe another speed bump. when he gets to college, but very similar game. Just knows how to get open, not a burner, not an elite athlete, just knows how to play football, knows how to get open. Well, Rico's been even far more productive in high school than CJ was because he's had to be the guy at Folsom, and I think that's a big part of what they do. So, I like the fact that they have to, they got the situation where they're looking to build that. That's a key for me.
Sure.
They're looking to build a receiving core that has some balance to it. And no, it doesn't necessarily have the slotty, twitchy Rodney Gallagher type on the board right now, other than Micah Tease, who we don't see him picking Notre Dame. But at least there's some diversity to where you can get certain things out of it outside of that. And so, people ask for comp. Bobby S. just said, is TJ Jones a good comp? I think TJ was maybe a little bit more elusive. I think Rico's bigger and a little bit more. I'd say Rico might even have a touch more long speed.
I feel like coming out of high school. Out of my mouth. I feel like he's a little bit faster from A to B.
Definitely bigger.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but where I like Bobby's comparison, Vince, is the way that TJ was used at Notre Dame could be very similar to how Rico could be used at Notre Dame.
Sure.
I've compared him to how Will Fuller was in high school. Will wasn't the burner. He just had really good body control and different things like that. But the point is, he is a bit of a volume guy. He's not necessarily going to have 3 catches for 120 yards like Braylon James might, right? He's going to have 120 yards on 9 catches, 10 catches. So he fits into that. Somebody mentioned DeAndre Hopkins, the Michael Thomas, that kind of role more so than a Braylon James who, may get his on a lot fewer catches, and that's okay. But again, that goes to what we like about the unique aspect of what they're trying to build. Now it's about finishing it off. And that's kind of what we're going to transfer to next, Vince, is the, sort of that what's next aspect of this recruitment.
Well, and this is the big one because somebody else in the chat said it. And I think you mentioned it. The goal is 4 here and they just got their second. So that means they're halfway there. They got 2 more to go. And we need to figure out, okay, who are those 2 going to be? Where do they stand with those 2? What do things look like moving forward with those 2 open slots?
So essentially, the way it's been for a few weeks now is, because I'm thinking of the time frame of when they canceled Christian Hamilton's visit. So they knew Rico was probably going to come during the weekend that he visited, if we're just being honest. Now, they felt good. He had talked about, I think this is the move. I think this is where I want to be. This is why we're telling you, we thought that was the weekend they moved the table. However, he was still planning on taking his visits.
Right.
And that's why we said at the time, like, okay, I feel really good about what Notre Dame has done, but can I feel good about it after he gets back in Columbus? That was the danger. Once Ohio State kind of canceled their visit, then it was a done deal. Even though I felt Notre Dame had put themselves in if he would have visited Ohio State going into that weekend, Notre Dame had emerged as his leader. There's no doubt. He was not a silent commit to the standpoint of we did a dancing thing for him. This is not one of those kids that we did the dancing thing for on the message board because of what I just said.
Right.
Even though he told Notre Dame he wanted to come and was going to come, but he still wanted to take his visits. My concern was, I don't know if they can survive that visit to Columbus. Now, they put themselves in the best chance, but we've seen this a million times, Vince, where that happens for Notre Dame and against, where a kid had kind of faded away from Notre Dame, but then he gets back on campus like, yep, now I remember why this is the move. And so, to me, that was a big thing for them. I was nervous about their ability to hold on to that lead if he went to Ohio State.
All right.
So once that can't – so the point is they felt good about where they were there, and that's partly why they canceled the visit for Christian Hamilton because 4 was the number. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 other kids on the board that they liked more than Christian Hamilton. And essentially it was, we need to get 2 of them. Well, Micah Tease, Notre Dame had been kind of, surging with, but he is going to go somewhere else now, we believe. And I believe he's going to commit today. I think today or tomorrow.
That was tomorrow, but either way.
Yeah. It won't be Notre Dame. That's what I do know. And so it's down to really 2 at this point in time. Now, there's some other guys they're still recruiting and still talking to, and but they're guys that are trending other places and all that. But really, it comes down to the 2 guys they really want are Ronan Hannafin and Jaden Greathouse. Right. Those are the 2 they want. That if you talk about sort of like where Notre Dame wants to finish this thing and where they hope they can get in their sort of their ideal class right now, based on how things are going, it's those 2. Now, all the visits are over.
Right.
Jaden Greathouse has talked about being a fall decision. Ryan and I have kind of been back and forth on this. Ryan thinks that he might take it into the fall. I think I'm slowly kind of wearing him down a little bit on the thought that I think there's a chance that he could decide sooner. We'll see how that plays out. Ronan Hannafin is just kind of I feel good about where Notre Dame is. I think Clemson, Alabama have made this tougher than maybe Notre Dame thought it was going to be for a while. I like where they are there. They just got to close, because the interesting thing is when you look at those two, they're very similar to what the current group is, right? Like Braylon James is the freaky athletic high upside guy. And then Rico Flores is the guy with all the production. Like Braylon James last 2 years are similar in numbers to what Rico did as a junior, just production wise. And because he doesn't play in an offense that throws the ball a lot and all that other kind of stuff. But then Rico's the polished, high production kind of guy, right?
Sure.
That plays against great competition. And then you've got Ronan and Jaden Greathouse, and they're kind of the same thing, but in a different package. Ronan's the super athletic, like high ceiling.
He's raw to me.
Very raw.
Yeah.
But incredibly athletic.
Yes, absolutely.
Very talented, but is going to need some time. Whereas Jaden Greathouse is the super polished, high floor, big guy, strong hands, so it's really interesting. So you'd have, if they're able to get them, and again, that's what they want. You have two guys that are really high floor, could maybe help out as freshmen just based off their skill, right? Their receiver skill. There's athletic skill and receiver skill. Right now, those two guys are, we talk about Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores. Those are the high floor guys. So if Notre Dame can close on Jaden Greathouse, and right now we like where Notre Dame stands, if they can close on him, you'd have at least two guys that, to me, could help you as a freshman based on their polish, which is important. And when you look at Jaden as well, he plays against great competition and has often been at his best in those big games. And so to me, when you look at that combination, it's about, then with Ronan, Ronan and Braylon could maybe play as freshmen just because they're so athletic.
Sure. You could find a package or like take advantage of their athleticism, that kind of a thing, because Ronan is one of the best athletes that it would be in this class if he commits.
Right.
I mean, he looks good defensively. He looks good offensively. He's not a technician at this point, but he can fly around the field.
And Ronan's recruitment has been interesting too, Vince, because early on, the staff was it was like Marcus Freeman and the defensive staff, and we're kind of the main recruiters for him.
Sure.
And then they decided that they liked him more on offense because he liked offense more and just where the room was trending. So it was interesting because instead of Chancey Stuckey taking over his recruitment, Tommy Rees took over that recruitment, which tells you a lot about how Notre Dame views Ronan Hannafin. When the offensive coordinator steps in and says, "I got this one," it tells you a lot, right? And so he's a very important piece of this puzzle, because again, it's nice to have high floor guys, Vince, but you have to bring in at least a couple guys also that have the high ceilings,
and that would be Hannafin
and Braylon James.
James. I agree. That describes them perfectly. I agree with you, because if they can harness the talent that is inside of those two guys and get them pointed in the right direction. And I'm not saying that these are bums on the street and they got to turn them into something great. They're clay that needs to be molded. That's all. They have amazing athletic ability, and they just need to be molded into quality wide receivers. And I'm pretty sure they got a good coach to be doing that. That's how I feel. So that was the thing that jumped off the film for me when I was watching Hannafin. It's just, he is an athlete. You could put him at linebacker. You could put him at safety. You could put him at wide receiver. You could probably put him at running back, and he would do whatever you needed him to do for his team. You know what I mean? And it would be great. Let me ask you something. As I'm watching his film, it looks like sometimes they're playing in like a park. Like there's no stands.
You're talking about you see that a lot on the East Coast. There's actually stands on the other side.
Okay.
A lot of those East Coast, because I dealt with this, even some of the D3 schools. You'll see that. Like we'll watch film of even when I was at Duquesne, some of the 1AA teams we would play.
No kidding.
It's very weird. They'd have like a nice big stands on the one side.
Oh, okay.
When I was in Muhlenberg, it was that way.
Okay.
So when I was in Muhlenberg, we had stands really on one side. They would bring out like fake stands, like temporary stands put on the other side for like the parents of the other team. But it was just like all the stands were on one side. We had nice size stands, but it was all on one side.
Really?
I don't know why that is, but you'll see that a lot on the East Coast.
That's crazy. It was like, oh, they're playing in somebody's backyard. That's what,
right.
that's what it looked
Sometimes
like.
I don't know if there's woods on the other side that they can't tear down, or I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
There's houses on the other side to where they had to build it.
It was
so the stands are all on one side. Yeah, it's a little strange. But the thing about this too, Vince, is you kind of look at the reason that they like Jaden and Ronan as the final two is if I'm looking at let's just say hypothetically that they are able to get Ronan and Jaden. This is for just the sake of argument, okay?
Yep.
To me, if I'm thinking about how I can get a starting lineup, there's so many different options. So the first option is okay, what just off the top of my head, how would I start these guys out? I'd have Braylon at ends. Everybody reaches their potential, right? I'd have Braylon at X. I'd have Rico in the slot and have Ronan Hannafin at W. Then I'm like, okay, but wait a minute. And then the reason I have Jaden is because I think Jaden can play everywhere. Right. And so Jaden may play as much as everybody else, but he's going to do it as rotating in at other spots. Right. Or you could say, okay, I'm going to go Braylon at W, Jalen at Z, and Ronan at X with Rico playing everywhere. Oh, hold on a second. Let's go Ronan at X, Braylon at Z. You know what I mean?
I see what you're doing here. I see where you're going.
That's the thing I like about it is because none of these kids can play one position guys.
Right.
And honestly, with the exception of Braylon James, I think the other three can all play slot. Braylon could do it. I just don't want him to do it. I want him outside where he's going to get more one-on-ones where he can use his explosiveness to go make plays. But I think all three of them could play inside as well.
Sure.
And I think it's important to have that. You need guys who can play multiple positions if you're going to really do it. And it's even more important, Vince, when you're stepping into a depth chart that is thin. Because it's like if Braylon's the most ready to play, but he can only play W, he can only help. What if you don't have a need at W?
Right.
Or if Jaden can only play in the slot, but what if you don't have a need in the slot? And on and on and on. So I think that's such an important piece of this whole thing when you talk about building this out. And we have a lot of super chats, but I just wanted to bring up a couple that were just huge. Really appreciate you, Jay Clampin Investments, very much, man. Really appreciate that big time. And then Montana Irish. Thank you also as well a bunch. And they both, I think Jay Clampett made a comment about, stashing the old basement with some Mountain Dews, and Montana Irish thanking us for just the coverage that we're doing. So
there's a reason I got a green wall. All right.
Yeah.
I'm bought into the Mountain Dew.
Yeah, that's why. Sure. There's nothing to do with your wife won't let you paint it.
Nope.
I'm sure. But we appreciate you both very, very much. Joe Papiti as well. Thank you for your super chat. Really, really appreciate that. We have some other super chats too, Vince, but they're questions, so we will get to those questions at the end. We just wanted to kind of to sort of tie put a bow on all this stuff right now first. And so Rico Flores commits to Notre Dame. He is commitment number 18. Notre Dame now has the number one ranked recruiting class by Rivals. They have the number one ranked recruiting class on 247, also on the 247 Sports Composite. They have the number one class on ESPN. The only one that does not have them number one is on 3, and their very weird way of doing it. I still don't understand how they do their rankings, to be completely honest with you. But Notre Dame is doing very well.
Yes.
And we're hoping that they'll add to that even more tomorrow at 4 p.m. on July 4th. Christian Gray, the cornerback out of St. Louis, will announce his decision between Notre Dame, LSU, and Ohio State. That's something that I've really enjoyed with this recruiting class, Vince. With the vast majority of these kids, it's sort of like they're not beating the schools they used to beat for kids. It's more like they're beating Michigan, they're beating Ohio State, they're beating LSU, they're beating USC, they're beating Georgia. You know what I mean? Yeah. Clemson.
Right.
And that's important. And again, it's important to a degree in that, as I've said before, people say, is Rico Flores a gap closer? Yeah, he's a gap closer from the standpoint of he makes you better.
Yes.
He raises your room. Is he a gap closer in that his talent by himself is such this great? No. But the reason that I think Ohio State liked him so much is because they love those polished kids that know how to play.
Right.
And Notre Dame needs more guys like that.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about like Deion Colsey and his immense potential, but it's like, does he's got to learn this, he's got to do that, he's got to learn this. Chase Claypool was that way, Miles Boykin was that way. It's good to have guys like Rico Flores that can come in and say, man, I don't have to worry about teaching this kid how to get into a stance, This kid knows how to stem. He knows how to manipulate leverage. He knows how to manipulate top ends. He understands leveling things off. He knows when to climb on a drag. Like, those are things this kid already has an understanding of what to do.
And he's
that's before he gets to a senior,
17. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly, Vince. It's before he even gets to a senior high school.
Right.
So now it's about, okay, Matt Bay, let's go work your magic on this kid, right? Then it's about, okay, but there now are some things that we can teach him. So when Rico gets in, there's going to be some technical things you want to work with him on, but a lot of it's going to be, okay, here's the playbook. Go learn it.
Yes.
Where with some other kids, it's like, okay, here's how you line up. Here's the proper, stance. Put this much weight on your front foot. Here's what stem means. Here's what you do when a guy's playing inside. Here's what you do when you're playing outside. Here's how you do this, this top end. Here's how you use your hands.
Right.
All that kind of stuff that Rico already has a good, and that's one thing. Yes. That's one of the things I loved about Tobias Merriweather.
Right.
It's one of the things I love about Jaden Greathouse. And then is Ronan Hannafin and Braylon James with their incredibly high athletic talent. Once they then learn, but that's the other thing. Once they learn it, they can be really good.
Right.
When you bring in 4 guys that you got to teach them all basically kind of from scratch how to play, that can be challenging.
Sure.
The nice thing, if they can get this group of 4, because Jaden and Rico are so advanced, you can then spend even more of your time on Ronan and Braylon.
Sure.
And that's important, because now my GA or my other people can kind of help those kids with the the playbook part. The veterans can help them. So like when a kid knows how to play, Lorenzo Styles is going to be able to do a lot more mentoring with Rico than he is Ronan or Braylon, because Lorenzo shouldn't be the one teaching you how to play the game. He's going to teach you to play. He's going to help you with the playbook. He's going to help you with the mental part. That's where a player should be helping a teammate, not here's how to get in your stance, here's how to stem. That's the coach's job. So veterans can help with that, Vince, while Chancey really hammers on, let's get this technique.
The fundamentals and the, this, that. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So it just adds to that. Somebody asked, about when is Greathouse's commitment date. He does not have one established. Right. So he has not set a commitment date. Right now, he's making a decision on whether he's going to commit in the fall or commit this summer. So that's where we're at, Vince. So again, potential for a great receiver class. They're now halfway there with Rico Flores joining Braylon James. Braylon was a great foundation to start. I also think this kind of speaks to Vince. Braylon James is a kid that had above a 5.0. I guess his school district was like one of those 5.0 districts, and he was above a 5.0. Great student. You look at Rico, who's a kid from Northern California. He has an offer from Yale. 2 4-star kids. One's a top 100 guy in Braylon. One's a borderline top 100 guy. Both great students. And it just continues to blow away that narrative that there aren't a lot of really talented kids that care about education, care about academics, care about all those kind of things. Yep. The difference now is Notre Dame has a football product that it can also sell.
Yep.
And it has a coaching staff willing to sell it. So this was a big one. And you have to love the patience, Vince. You have to love the patience that this staff showed.
Because in the past, they would have bailed on the Rico Flores recruitment. They would have bailed on it because everybody was saying, he's going to Ohio State. He's going to Ohio State. They would have bailed on that. And then when it became clear that maybe he wasn't going to go to Ohio State, they would have been too far back because they would have stopped. That's what would have happened. And in the same situation, let's call it 4 years ago, right? I'm telling you, this kid's not in the class. It's not because they would have bailed on it.
Right. I agree. Especially once they realized it was Ohio State and Georgia and other teams like that. Yeah. So really nice pickup, Vince. And that kind of puts a bow on the Rico Flores aspect of it. Before you don't leave yet, because we are going to answer some questions. And we will open this up for questions for people that want to ask about Rico, ask about recruiting and those stuff. We're going to stick to questions about recruiting and Rico in this. I don't want to get into conversations about the conferences and all that. If you want to know our opinion on that, we did like a 2.5 hour long show where we talked a lot about that yesterday. And Sean, and I think Sean, were you on with you weren't on with Vince, you weren't on with Sean when he had that conference realignment show the other night, right? I think he was with somebody else on that particular day. So anyway, we'll stick to some recruiting stuff, but this is a big commitment for Notre Dame.
Huge,
This is certainly a good, really, really, really strong one. But they got 2 more to go, right? They got to close on Ronan. They got to close on Jaden Greathouse.
If they stop here, that's a failure. Like you have failed in my, if you stop here, they need 4, and they got a great shot at 2 more guys, but they need to close, and that has always been the PTSDs is hitting hard. Got to close, and if you can close, then that starts to go away a little bit, which is great.
Right. No doubt about it. So that's going to do it for the Rico portion of the show. We do want to dive into questions here. We already have some submitted. If you want to submit more, please do so. We will certainly address those and answer those. And again, a thank you again to Jay Clampin Investments, Montana Irish, and Joe Popiti for their earlier super chats, and we really appreciate those. We had one from Alan Watson. He said, "Hey, BK here at the 9th hole in Augusta. What's up, IB Nation? Hold on, getting recruiting alert. What, another one? Oh, crap, call coming from the LSU president." The pithiness of that is just absolutely brilliant. Get some of these super chats out of the way before we talk specific questions. Charlie Weiss's last bell loop. Thank you for the super chat. He says, but Brian Kelly said Notre Dame can't get top recruits. Psh, Marcus Freeman is ruining that man's whole career at Notre Dame in one recruiting cycle. The only way he's ultimate, I get what you're saying, and I love what you're saying, but at the end of the day, I mean, we're having some fun. He's going to get evaluated not on how many number one ranked or number two or number three recruit class. It's about, can you get W's on the field?
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's the only thing that's going to change anyone's perception of Brian Kelly as a football coach.
Can we have those same conversations that we were having about Brian Kelly, that he wins the games he's supposed to win? That's step one. You got to win the games you're supposed to win, and we shouldn't be worried about it. You should be winning those games. And then if he wants to completely erase the Kelly, not completely erase, that's hyperbolic.
Right.
But if he wants to take that next step, then it's about winning the playoff games and a national championship. Then we're not talking about it anymore. And that's where I personally want to be.
Yep. Here's a good one from Irish Chi-Town, Vince, and I'll let you answer this one because he directed it to you. It says, Vince, how do you feel about the wide receiver room currently? So let's just kind of talk
about the recruits.
Let's talk about the current room, and then I'd also like to kind of get your thoughts on, the future of it if they're able to add on the guys that we talked about. Because one of the things you did, Vince, is because you understand recruiting is not really Vince's what we ask Vince to do. Vince can evaluate film, he can grade recruits and all that. It's just we ask him to do other things. So for this show, however, he was able to go back and watch the film, and Vince is a former receivers coach and all that. So that's partly also why I wanted to get him on the show also, because he knows the game. So Vince, current receiver room, and then thoughts on what it could look like with the guys coming back, plus the potential four-man class that Notre Dame is working on.
So let's start with the current receiver room, right? They've got 7 scholarship players. They're down to 6, really, because Joe Wilkins isn't healthy. He's not participating right now, right? So really they're down to 6. So they're down to a 2 deep at wide receiver of scholarship players. I like the top end talent in the room. I really do. I think Thomas is going to surprise some people. I think Colsey, with the proper coaching, is going to do a really good job. And those guys are on the second team right now, and I think they're going to be just fine. I like the addition of Merriweather. I think that he is that classic high floor, high ceiling kind of guy. And I think that he's going to come in and he's going to do some good things. I think Braden Lenzy is a different dude than we've seen. And we've talked about it a bunch of times on the show, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse. But I love where he's at. I love his attitude at practice. I love the way he's attacking things, both from a physical standpoint, attacking the ball and all of those different things, but attacking practice in general. I love what he's doing. I've always been a Lorenzo Styles fan. That hasn't changed. He's going to take his game to another, he's going to take a step in the right direction, another level from where he was at. And let's be honest, he had a really good game against Oklahoma State. So he's heading in the right direction. So I really like that as well. And Avery Davis is just going to be that steady veteran. And I think that that's a really good piece that this room needs, is that steady veteran, right? Braden Lenzy is going to be really good on the field, but Avery Davis is that leader in the clubhouse, as they say.
Former quarterback. I mean,
exactly. He understands how to lead, and I love that about him. And
you're getting a quarterback mentality at receiver.
Exactly.
That's huge.
Look, injuries could hurt this group. Okay. I mean, they'll have 7, right? And that is concerning. But if they don't deal with any season-ending injuries, if they're just dealing with the normal, if they're just dealing with the normal bumps and bruises and things like that, this receiving core is going to be just fine. And so I'm really happy with where this receiving core is. I've got a lot of confidence in where the receiving core is.
So what about the future, Vince? As you kind of look at, obviously, the 4 we anticipate coming back, again, barring no one leaving or no devastating injuries, you're going to have the 3 current sophomores, Lorenzo Styles, Deion Colsey, Jade Thomas, plus the freshman Tobias Merriweather, who everybody knows I'm a big fan of. And then you get the potential freshman class of, we know that Braylon James and Rico Flores are in it. And then if they are, in fact, able to get Jaden Greathouse and Ronan Hannafin, Jaden Greathouse, whatever order you want to put them in, how do you feel about the future of it? Knowing that you still need to fill up in 2024 because you're still a 24 follow-up away from really rejuvenating and restocking the depth chart.
Because you're only going to have 8. You're only going to have 8 scholarship players based on recruiting and based on guys that are leaving, because we assume and you're going to have to help me out here with as far as where the years of eligibility are left.
Yeah, so
Lindsey and Davis are out.
When this class steps on campus, barring Braden Lindsey coming back for a 6th year, which I don't see.
Okay.
Or Joe Wilkins coming back for a 6th year, which I don't see.
Okay.
You'll have the 3 sophomores. So they'll be juniors. So when this class gets on campus, Lorenzo, Dion, and Jaden will be juniors. Tobias will be a sophomore.
Right.
Obviously, these guys will be freshmen, which means Dion and Lorenzo are entering, if breakout seasons commence, they could be off.
They could be
the National Football League.
So here's what I'll say. So we're taking 3 out, we're adding 4, so that's a +1. So you're still sitting at 8. And I agree with Brian that 10 is the ideal number, right? Mm-hmm. And you're still 2 away from that. So do I keep an eye on the transfer portal? Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the transfer portal if it's somebody that can come in and actually help. I'm not going to the transfer portal for a body. I don't think that that's where Notre Dame needs to be, because they're going to have talented depth. They don't need to go to the portal for a body. Okay. So does that make sense what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You don't need that. Even though you're 2 away from where you ideally want to be, I don't think you do that. And we started talking about this 4-man class. I think it's a very balanced 4-man class. You just said it. You came up with 3 or 4 different starting lineups just with these 4 guys that are coming in. That's awesome. And that's how you use your 8-man depth to almost mimic a 10-man depth, because you've got guys that can play multiple positions. And so it's almost like you've got 1 for 2 in a couple of different areas. Rico could play a couple different spots. I think Greathouse could potentially play a couple different spots, right? So you're almost 8 for 10, in my opinion, because you've got some guys that can do some different things. And so I really like the type of depth that they have. I want 10. I want 10, right? But the 8 guys that they've got, they're versatile enough that it almost mimics a 10, which I'm very happy with. And so I like the group that's going to be coming back. And you're going to have 4 guys with a ton of snaps under their belts, is what I'm guessing, going into the 23 season. And so that's going to help them as well. You're not going to have guys that are coming. Yeah, the freshmen, obviously, they don't have any experience, but you're going to have 4 guys with a boatload of experience, and then you're bringing in talented guys who can supplement that moving forward. You don't need those guys to start. It's not that kind of a situation where, like, the defensive line that we had where there were freshmen. Well, guess what? You got to be in the rotation.
But you will have freshmen that have to play.
But they can.
Right.
Well, if they get themselves in.
Agree with you. That's where I'm excited about the talent. The only thing that if we're going to be consistent, you and I have always said, we don't like it when freshmen have to play.
Right.
You want them to earn it. Now, the good thing is, to your point, Vince, and I agree with you completely, there's the talent in the room that I feel like at least 1 or 2 of them are going to be ready to play. Maybe it's both of the high floor guys. Maybe it's both of the high ceiling guys. Maybe it's 1 high floor, 1 high ceiling. You know what I mean? There's enough guys there to say, boy, these guys should be, and maybe it's more than 2.
Sure.
But you need at least 2 to have because you want to have a 5, you want to have a 6-man rotation.
Like, I agree.
You know, 5, you can get away with 5, but you want to have ideally a 6-man rotation. So in order to get that, you need at least 1 guy to even make a 5-man rotation.
Right.
Much less to get to 6.
Right.
And so that's where I say, like, it's not ideal in that the lack of experience because of the freshman class, you're going to force the freshman class to make an impact. But the flip side of that is, it's like, I don't love when freshman defensive linemen have to play.
Right.
But sometimes you're like, yeah, but they're going to be all right. So, like, if the current defensive line class has to play because injuries or transfers or whatever, and let's say Riley Mills has a 13 sack year and goes pro. I'm just like making it for an argument's sake, right?
Right.
You're like, well, okay, so Jason Moore steps in and plays a little earlier than you think. Or if they're able to get him, or Keon Keeley, if they're able to get him, or Devin Houston are able to get him, or you know what I mean? So, like, if you're able to get Jason Moore, and even without Jason Moore, okay, Keon Keeley, if he has to play, it's going to be fine. right?
Right.
Boubacar can help you as a freshman. Devin Houston can help you as a freshman. Brendan Vernon can help you as a freshman. If they had to play, you just don't ever want to be in a situation where you have to play a freshman. And that would be my only concern is just is that when you look at the 2023 receiver room, that would be my only concern.
No, absolutely. And that's a concern that's based on depth, where all those defections in those two classes you're still feeling that. Like you're still feeling that pain, because those guys would be seniors next year in 23. They would still be on the roster, so you still wouldn't be dealing with this depth issue. That when you get defections from two classes like that, it'll affect you for 4 years, you know, and Brian Kelly doesn't have to worry about that. He's not here anymore. And so Marcus Freeman has to absorb that, and you got to go 4 wide receivers and probably another 4 wide receivers to get things back to where they need to be, because you're still going to have guys graduating out, and now we're hitting that gap those guys would have been.
I want to respond to a couple things. Number one is so I was looking at Christian Gray's announcement for tomorrow, and it says it's going to commit at 4 p.m., but I forgot that he's in Central Time. So it's 4 p.m. Central, so it'll be 5 Eastern. So we'll go live at 5 Eastern tomorrow for that one. Just make ssure that we're clear on that one. But that's why you have to hit that notification bell, Vince, because then you'll know. We'll tell you what time. Also, another question that we had, or somebody had said something. I want to respond to this one too. I'm trying to find it here. It was from Salty Virginia Peanuts. He says, no shade on Reese, but taking over recruitment from Stuckey isn't necessarily a good thing. Stuck is getting the job done. I'm going to disagree with that a little bit, because I've had some issues with Tommy Reese's quarterback recruiting, but the one thing he's done a really good job of is recruiting offense as a whole. The problem that he's had in the past is he would be the reason they would get kids. So Coach Alexander was the reason that Deion Colsey decommitted, because he just stopped talking to him. Tommy Reese is the reason he came back into the class, right? Chip Long was a big reason why those guys committed, because he was the offensive coordinator when they actually committed. They committed during the 2019 season. Tommy Reese had played a big role in getting C.J. Williams and Amorian Walker in the class. And then he just couldn't have help keeping them because the receivers coach wasn't getting the job done. So this isn't a shot at Stuckey. This isn't a Stuckey can't get the job done. This is more of one of those ones where you're bringing out the big gun for it. And the reality is Tommy Reese is the offensive coordinator, and you talk to a lot of these kids, Tommy Reese's name gets brought up a lot with these offensive players and these skill players. So yes, Chancey Stuckey's getting the job done so far. There's no doubt about it. But anytime, and this isn't to say that Chancey Stuckey doesn't talk to Ronan Hannafin. He does. What I'm telling you is like it's anything. If the boss, so to speak, steps in to handle the recruitment, it shows you the importance of that recruitment. There's no recruit on the board on either side of the ball where only one coach is talking to that kid. It used to be that way at Notre Dame for bad reasons and good reasons. For example, nobody talked to offensive linemen except for Harry Heastand. That's not even the case anymore. And Coach Heastand's embraced it because this is such a staff effort. So you just have to understand that sometimes the coordinators or the head coach is going to make a kid, that's my guy. I got to get that guy.
Sure.
And part of the thing with Ronan Hannafin is this is one where Marcus Freeman was like, we need to get that guy. And so Tom Reese is like, bet, I got that. Right. And so Coach Stuckey as well. Everything that I've heard is Stuckey loves Ronan Hannafin just like he loves Jane Greathouse, but it's about how can you properly distribute your resources? When you still have 3 uncommitted receivers on the board, hey, I got this one. You go get those. Right? That's teamwork. That's what we've been saying for years we wanted more of. So I don't want to then throw shade that they're using their resources that way to say, oh, the Chancey Stuckey should have this one. I think it's a good thing. And that's the only way you can really get a 4-man class at receiver is if you're using all your tools in the tool belt, so to speak. Is that I don't, Vince, I'm not a real handy guy. Is that the proper expression, tools in your tool belt?
Right. Tools in the toolbox, whatever. Yeah.
Right.
I have one of those. It's got some cobwebs on it, but I do have one.
Yeah, I don't really use that. Bobby S. also says, any chance with the COVID redshirt medical things that if Lindsey, Davis, and Wilkins can come back next year? Davis is done. He's on his 6th year. He's already using his COVID year. Yeah. 2022 will be Avery Davis's COVID year.
Yeah.
That's it, because he got hurt late last year. So he couldn't use a medical for his injury last year. His injury is why he decided to come back for a 6th year, I believe. But he is using his COVID year. Lindsey and Wilkins could. I just don't know if that would be wise, especially with how much Joe Wilkins has been injured in his career. I don't know if I would want to take that chance of counting on him.
Sure.
But look, if that was the case and they could make the numbers work, I'd be fine with one of those two guys coming back. I just don't know if it makes a lot of sense to do it because I think they're both great kids and I think they're both really strong leaders. Joe's a very good leader. It's just he hasn't been able to stay healthy. That's been the problem with Joe.
And that's where you have to be careful what you're balancing between using a scholarship to bring a guy back and using it for a new recruit. I mean, that it's a balancing act, and you have to decide, okay, well, what's more important now versus what's more important in the future, all of those different things. And every coach is different when it comes to that argument. And it varies player to player to player. So it's going to be interesting.
Let's get to some more questions here from everybody. This is more of a comment from Michael. With each additional commitment that Notre Dame adds to the 23 and 24 classes, other recruits are taking notice and want to be part of something that is truly epic. This is amazing. You are not wrong.
No doubt.
And that is such an important piece to this whole thing.
Kids aren't stupid, man. They know what's going on.
Vince, you and I have been saying this on this channel for years, man. Football guys, dudes want to play with dudes, man. And so, he's absolutely right. The more you get, the more you attract other guys. I mean, that's what we see at Bama and Ohio State, right, Vince? I mean, that's what we see at those schools.
No doubt.
Irish Shytown says, Brian, which receiver do you expect to commit next? It'll be one of Hannafin or Greathouse. Honestly, if I was a betting man right now, I'd probably put my money on Ronan Hannafin just because I think Ronan has talked. I think that the decision for Ronan was always kind of before the season started, where Greathouse has been kind of back and forth. So if we're just going off the latest things that they've told us, I think Ronan could be that guy. But I won't be shocked if both of them are committed somewhere by the end of this summer, like somewhere. I don't think it's necessarily a lock that Ronan is going to commit to Notre Dame, but I think Notre Dame's in a good place. And same with Jaden Greathouse. If he commits this summer, I like where Notre Dame is at. If he decides to postpone things, then obviously other schools will have a shot. So that's kind of where we are with that. The world famous Scotty Nitro. Do you think that Ronan Hannafin and Jaden Greathouse could be waiting to make a decision in order to see if Notre Dame lands a quarterback in this cycle? No, I don't think that's the case. I haven't heard that anyway. No one's mentioned that to me. I think with Jaden, it was more about just wanting to see how the offenses look at the schools he's looking at. I don't think that's a concern. And again, both of these guys are very well aware of who CJ Carr is. And Ronan actually has met CJ because they were on campus together for Ronan's official visit. I don't know if CJ came back in town the week after when Jaden was on campus. I don't know if he did or didn't. I'm not sure. But to me, I think a quarterback could have helped this class even more. But I will say that they have done a pretty good job of putting together a heck of a class without one.
Yeah. That's a really good point, though, because normally it's the quarterback that kind of spearheads everything and everything kind of comes off of the quarterback, at least on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
And they've done all of this amazing recruiting, the number one recruiting class in the country currently. And I realize defense has something to do with that, too. But, I mean, the offensive line class that they put together so far, the wide receivers, I mean, the tight end that they wanted, they got, they're doing this without a quarterback committed. And there isn't one necessarily on the horizon that's going to commit that everybody knows about. It just hasn't happened yet. Like, this is impressive. I'm telling you, it's easier to recruit offensive players when you have a quarterback in the fold and you be like, look, this guy's going to be throwing you balls. This guy's going to be handing the ball off, whatever. This is the guy you're going to be protecting. And they haven't had that. That's big.
This was the comment Jay Clampett made after his big super chat, which we appreciate, obviously. So some holiday cash for Mountain Dew for Brian and some bubblegum blueberry white claws for Vince. I don't know what those are. I don't know what those are.
White Claws is a beer. I know that.
Montana Irish said, appreciate the great coverage of the holiday weekend. That was after his super chat. So again, we appreciate both of y'all very, very much.
No doubt.
Let's get to a few more here. If you guys want to get us some questions, go ahead and throw them in now. We're just going to kind of get to the end of some of these ones that we starred and then get rocking and rolling. Mark 1 with super chat. Thank you, Mark. Sent you the vid for your Mexican dining in Vegas.
Ooh, nice.
Hope you guys enjoy. Tell Vince don't eat too much. Great breakdown.
No promises.
Can't have to say Vince and I've had plenty of dinners together. I can't make any promises.
No promises.
Can't make any promises.
I'm going to throw one up here, Brian, just so you can speak to it here real quick. Peter asks, speaking of quarterback, where does Notre Dame?
We'll have that conversation another day.
That's what I want you to
I'm not look. The reality is because we said we could ask recruiting questions, so it's not off limits. It's just there's nothing new to report. I do believe Notre Dame is still trying to recruit Dante Moore. There are other quarterbacks that they've started to reach out to. I think they're kind of in that middle ground phase, right? Say, okay, are we ready to give up on him? No, we're not. Are we ready to fully jump on to some other guys? No, we're not. And so I think that's kind of where they are right now. Is just reassess the board, continue to try to recruit. Because right now, Dante Moore's not committed anywhere. So why would you give up on him right now?
Yep.
You'd be a fool to do that, in my opinion. And they're not. So that's kind of where they are. Where do they go from here? For now, for the short term, keep doing what keep doing what you were doing and get back to that, right? Which is, that's what I think they should do. And as of right now, they have not moved on from Dante Moore just yet. So I say just be patient, let it play out. We'll see kind of what happens with him here as we move forward with that. Stephen Goodson with a comment: Rico route running and getting a pass from a position passer like CJ Carr. I'm about to blow my top. Look, and that's the thing. And if you look at whether it's CJ Carr, Dante Moore, some of the other guys that we've looked at, like there's the Austin Novosad kid who's a Baylor commit from Texas. If you look at a lot of the quarterbacks that Notre Dame has targeted in the 23 and 24 classes, they're very accurate quarterbacks. And that's another reason guys like that they're recruiting are important, because, Rico's precision route running with a quarterback like CJ Carr, whose ball placement is so good. That was something we love about Dante Moore. That's something I like about Austin Novosad. Some of the other quarterbacks that are on the board for Notre Dame is that precision when a guy that can run routes like Rico can is so important. When you have guys that are as athletic and big as Braylon and Ronan, and as someone who's as polished as Jaden Greathouse, man, just put that sucker in a spot and let them go get it. And that's something that I really like. But you have to have a really accurate quarterback to do that. And that's certainly what CJ Carr brings to the table. I mean, that's of his physical, like throwing traits, that's my favorite one, Vince. It's his ball placements is as good as you're going to find.
Yep.
And
no doubt.
That's something I absolutely love about him as a player. Bobby S. also asks, which of the 4 receivers are we going to sign are going to be early enrollees? I think that's very important. Yeah, that's incredibly important, Vince, because of all the depth we just talked about.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredibly. And usually I am not a fan of early enrollees from an off the field standpoint. It's just it's hard for me to be on board with missing the last half of your senior year. But from a straight football standpoint and the depth issues at wide receiver, I want as many of those guys in early as possible. So I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, and I totally get that. But early enrolling isn't for everybody. You have to be mature enough to handle that. I mean, we're not even talking about reclassifying to another year, which people are bringing up. But, you have to be mature enough
to handle to stop. Right.
I mean, agree completely.
Yeah. Right now.
But yeah, it's I want every one of those guys in early if possible. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So as far as early enrollees, the only thing that could limit, so all 4 of the guys that right now we believe Notre Dame wants and we think that they either have or lead for. So you're talking about Braylon James, Rico Flores, Ronan Hannafin, and Jaden Greathouse. All 4 of them are really good students. And so, and we've talked about this, Braylon and Rico especially are elite students for football prospects. Right. And as I said, Braylon had credible offers. Rico has an offer from Yale. Ronan has great academic offers. Jaden's got some of those as well. They're all able to enroll early in regards to the course load, from what I'm told. What I don't know is I don't know if they all 4 go to high schools that let them graduate early.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Because that's why Brennan Vernon's not enrolling early. I don't believe his high school allows them to enroll early. There are some. Josh Lugg didn't enroll early for that reason, because his high school doesn't allow it. You have to have your high school has a say in this. If they don't want kids 100%. Leaving early, then they don't have to do that. So I don't know where that stands, but my understanding is Notre Dame is pushing hard to get all of them. Braylon was actually trying to completely reclassify. Braylon James was trying to reclassify. The problem is Notre Dame doesn't have the numbers. They don't have the room.
They don't have the scholarships.
Right. That's the only reason that didn't happen. Yeah. But so I mean, he's so far ahead that he literally academically would have had a chance to reclassify. He's definitely going to be an early enrollee. I'd be shocked if Rico and Jaden and Ronan also aren't, as long as their high school allows it. And I don't know specifically if where each of those kids stand in regard to that. So I don't want you to I don't want you to take me as saying Driscoll said all 4 of them are early enrollees. I'm just saying all 4 of them are academically in a position where they could be early enrollees. I just don't know where things stand with their high schools in regard to that. So that's kind of the question that I would say right now is where we're at. All right, let's get to some more of these questions. We do have some more questions rolling in, Vince. Here's an interesting one. William Chesney, is secondary or wide receiver recruiting more important? Before I answer this, William, I guess my question for you would be, what are you referring to? Are you referring to like the close in this particular class? Or are you talking more which position in this class has the bigger need, the most important need, or are you talking about like in general? So I guess that would be part of my question for you on that one, but I'll answer it this way, Vince. We'll answer kind of a couple different ways. The first one is in this particular class, I would have to say you have to separate secondary and between safety and corner. Okay. Because a corner, I honestly think they could get away with only 1 corner. It's not ideal, but they get away with it because you have 3 from the 2021 class, so they all redshirted. Right. So they're all going to be redshirt freshmen this year. Then you've got the 2 incomings in Jaden Mickey and Benjamin Morrison, and then you add Micah Bell. So that's 6 kids that basically are all going to kind of fit into a freshman, sophomore, eligibility kind of together since those kids redshirted. And so in that regard, I think corner's actually kind of good now. Like now they I think ultimately need a second. Sure. Like I said, they could get away with just 1. They want and ideally need 2. Safety, you had to get 2. I mean, to me, safety was a much bigger numbers need than corner. And then receiver was incredibly important. So I'm going to go with receiver simply because, A, I think it's harder to get transfers at receiver, and B, because the need was so great numbers-wise that they had to hit it big. Because here's the other thing. Peyton Bowen and Adon Schuler don't have to play as freshmen. Christian Gray, if he picks Notre Dame, and Micah Bell, who has picked Notre Dame, don't have to play as freshmen. Notre Dame needs at least 1 receiver, if not 2, that have to play as freshmen. So I think from a pressure standpoint, that's there. I think, and we talk big picture, I think they have to do even better in the secondary than they do in offense. Because as Vince and I think are on the same page on this, Vince, as an offensive coach, give me good players. Give me a bunch of Rico Floreses, and I can put together a really good offense.
Yes.
I need
more dudes on defense. Yes. I need dudes on defense. And I remember talking to some high school coaches about that. It's like, hey, give me as many dudes as you can. I'm putting them on defense. Give me as many smart – I don't want to pigeonhole myself here by saying like smart guys, but like football IQ, that kind of guy, I could put together a pretty darn good offense. Now, I'd love to have I'm talking high school. I'd love to have a dude at quarterback. I'd love to have a dude at running back. Let's go. You know what I mean? And I can get away with a bunch of possession guys at wide receiver. I don't necessarily need a game breaker. So I would put my dudes on defense. So I guess I would, if I'm following my own logic, I would say secondary is more important. But in the current climate at Notre Dame, they need wide receivers, and they need all the different variances of a wide receiver at Notre Dame so that they can stay balanced. I think that's the most important thing when they're trying to get their offense to where they want it.
Yeah. William Chesney also says, in 2024, with Ohio State being the heralded wide receiver how big is it that even though we might not match them recruiting a receiver, our secondary recruiting has been top-notch, closing in on elite secondary status?
It's incredibly important.
Because these kids don't have any impact on what happens this year, but they could next year when they play in Notre Dame Stadium against Ohio State, right? Exactly. And then there was a really interesting question yesterday, Vince, that we had in the was it the mailbag or was it yesterday? Were you on was it the mailbag Friday when we were asked about Notre Dame and Ohio State going against each other?
About the over-under
4.5 times?
Yeah, it was me.
Right.
Yeah,
so that's an interesting one. Yes, because if Ohio State's recruiting at an elite level, and it has been for years, Notre Dame is starting to recruit at an elite level, right? They got to close on this class. Last year they were on the verge. They weren't quite an elite class last year because there's too many misses on offense. Sure. But their defensive recruiting was elite, in my opinion. Right. And at least with the exception of you missed out on safety, right? But
Marcus Freeman was there for that whole cycle. Right. Now he's over helping offense, and now he's going to get a full
and
cycle
he's hired
24.
better recruiters
100%
than what they had.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's nice to see because, like it says, well, no, Notre Dame doesn't have the receiving core Ohio State has. So, like, those receivers aren't playing against each other.
Exactly.
The important thing for Notre Dame is, okay, can you cover those dudes?
Right.
And that's the challenge, right? Because they are putting together year after year. I mean, this year's receiver class is excellent. Go look at last year's class. That was not a bum receiver class. That was a really good receiver class.
Right.
And like the kid that got most of the hype rankings wise, Caleb Burton, I thought was their third best receiver. I mean, that maybe fourth. I mean, I liked him. He's a good player, but I liked the kid from Chicago more, Caleb Brown more. I like Keon Graves even more, the kid from Arizona. And I think the kid from Georgia, although raw, has a higher ceiling than Caleb Burton. So, I mean, that's what Ohio State's doing. The year before that, they got Marvin Harrison and Emeka. I mean, you know what I mean, Vince? Like, so that's what Ohio State's doing. They're stringing them. It's not like Bama had that one great receiver class, and then like Jalen Wall the next year, and then you know, and so now it's like they've had to go get some transfers because they had some years where they weren't quite. Ohio State is stacking them up year after year after year. This is now 3 elite receiving classes in a row. 2 elite, 1 really good. The 2022 receiver class for Ohio State was really good. It's not elite because it's not to the level this class is, and it's not to the level, in my opinion, of the Emeka Marvin Harrison class. But it was really good.
Right.
This Notre Dame class is better than last year's Ohio State class, but it's not quite on the level of the one that Ohio State's putting together now. But again, so what? They don't play each other.
Right.
Notre Dame's got to be able to match them with what they're landing on defense. And that's the encouraging thing, is because Notre Dame is recruiting defense at an elite level because they've upped their secondary recruiting in a big way in the 23 class. Started last year really at corner because I think Mickey and Morrison was an outstanding corner tandem.
Yeah.
Then if you're able to get Christian Gray, you can then have 2 in a row, right? So 2 outside. But then also, I don't know if anybody is recruiting the defensive line as well as Notre Dame is right now.
Right.
A&M had like that one great class. Didn't do great the year before, not doing great now. But when you talk about year after year, Notre Dame is starting to string together some really good deep line classes.
And that's going to neutralize some stuff, man.
But the key is they got to get Jaden Ausberry. If they can get Jaden Ausberry, Vince, you've now stacked up 2 elite linebacker classes in a row as well.
Sure.
And I'll say this. If Notre Dame gets Christian Gray tomorrow, he ran a 4.41 and a 4.42 at Ohio State's camp last summer. That would make him the 3rd fastest DB in this class for Notre Dame. 3rd fastest. He'd be one of the slow guys at secondary for Notre Dame. Because Peyton Bowen's a 4.38 and Micah Bell is
really fast.
We don't know his 40 time, but if you translate his track time
right
to what we see from other guys that run track and what they've done at the combine, they're high 4.2, low 4.3 guys. And that's what Micah Bell is. So that's the thing that matters more is Notre Dame's got to be able to dominate up Ohio State in the trenches and then be good enough on the back end to compete with them.
And you're not going to win every single battle with those guys.
That's how Clemson has beaten them.
You got to neutralize it to a degree.
Right. That's how Clemson has beaten Ohio State in the past, is because they were able to just kind of be really good on defense on the defensive line and beat Ohio State in the trenches.
Right.
Then you don't have to cover as long. Right. And that's a big part of that. And that's why Ohio State almost beat Clemson in 2019, Vince, because those corners, Clemson had a great receiving core in 2019, but they just came out. You had Justin Ross on one side. You saw T. Higgins on the other. You had Amari Rodgers in the slot. And Ohio State with Jeff Okudah and that secondary, they just came up and beat Clemson up. And then that year, Ohio State had there's this kid named, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Vince, a kid named Chase Young. You ever heard of him? Played DN for Ohio State.
Average bench warmer.
But the point is, if you can be physical on the perimeter and run well,
exactly,
and you have a great D line that can pressure the quarterback, then you're going to have a chance for success. The problem is Clemson's defense was even better, and the reality is Clemson had the better quarterback. Those were the two differences, because both receiving corps had their struggles in that game. It's just that at the end of the day, it was Trevor Lawrence was a better player than Justin Fields. At the end of the day, that's what it boiled down, and that's not by much. Justin had some nice plays that game. It's just Trevor Lawrence was just. I mean, he was just the best quarterback in college football after Joe Burrow that year. So it was it's a great question, Will, and really intriguing. But the fact that we're having this conversation is the fun part, because a year ago we're like, why are we talking about Ohio State people? Notre Dame started dominating Michigan on the recruiting show. Why are we talking about Ohio State, right? Like they're not on that level right now.
They've left Michigan in the dust.
Right. Now we are talking about Ohio State, and can Notre Dame, where does Notre Dame stack up against Ohio State? Because that's where they're trending.
That occurred faster than I anticipated.
Much more so. Yes. Much more so. That's a good point, Vince. Very good point. Here we go. We got a question from Let Manager One. Does Jeremiah Love have a rough commitment timeline? I don't believe he has a timeline right now. Ryan would be a better person to answer that, and we'll have him back on Tuesday. We're gonna have our recruiting hour on Tuesday this week when Ryan gets back. Well, actually, I don't think he'll be back in town, but he'll be able to do a show on that day. He'll be able to answer that because he talks to Jeremiah. But from our conversations, I don't believe Jeremiah has a timeline. He has talked in the past about making a decision before the season, I believe, but I'll have to check with Ryan on that point. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Is Ryan Wingo a get at this point? Charlie, I think he's meaning must get at this point in time, Vince.
Okay.
But I would say, is he a must get? Yes. I would say he's a must get. But is he a guy that they're going to get? I don't know.
Is he a 24 or 23?
He's a 24 guy.
Okay.
He's a 24 guy. He's a kid that's also a Missouri kid. Very talented receivers on campus recently as well. All right, let's get to the next one from Troy McIntosh.
Troy McIntosh, would LZ be a take if we miss on one of the last two?
That's a good question, Troy. I think it would depend on who they miss. If they missed on Jaden Greathouse, I could see it. If they miss on Ronan Hannafin, I don't. The reason I see that is because Malik is more of a similar player to Jaden. If you miss on Ronan Hannafin, you're missing out on an elite athlete, and I think you need to try to replace him with another big-time athlete. I don't want three bigger, polished type of guys at receiver in one class. It would be a challenging replacement for that. So, I'm not sure how I wouldn't love that one, honestly. I would work on, if you think your offense is going to be good this season, that would be one where I'd say, hey, look, if you get Greathouse, let's say, and you miss on Hannafin, I'd say just go into the season and try to get some uncommitted kid or flip somebody that you like or whatever. If you miss on Greathouse, I could maybe be okay taking that, but even then I'd still say shoot bigger, right? Shoot bigger. And that's kind of where I would be. So I saw that Mark One also said the other day his son signed up for the board. So we were joking about would he be Mark Two, and he said no, his son is David. So we lost all the fun on that one. So apologize on that. Let's see here if we can get any more here. Tony Stengel. I appreciate this, Tony.
Yeah, Tony says, I think we need to take a minute and thank Brian, Ryan, and Vince and the rest of the IB team for taking time out of their holiday weekend to cover this stuff for us. Thank you, boys.
Yeah, it's a really tough life that we have to take time out of our day to talk Notre Dame.
I know, right? And my wife is walking the mall right now with my kid, so I was
at the mall earlier with Ange.
I had to miss out on that. That's rough.
You need to call her, Vince, and tell her to go to the candy store. They have the candy store there has chocolate covered almonds that are much cheaper than the ones at South Bend Chocolate Factory. Really good.
Here, not to go down a rabbit hole here, but my son's best friend, their family owns that place.
Okay.
So we're in there.
Well, tell them that the guy you work with, your buddy Brian, is helping keep them employed with the amount of chocolate covered almonds I bought from them today. They also sell the Jelly Bellies.
Yeah.
I really like. So Ange and I got some of those today because she's getting new earrings, but she has to get like specialty kinds because she's allergic to a lot of different types of metals.
Yeah.
And so she wanted me to go with her today. So I went with her.
Nice.
I had to do the good husband thing.
We
went to Salsa's for lunch.
Yeah.
And
nice. Well done.
So we're doing that. So that's when I set the show, and then Sean sends me the the info about the baseball coach because there's, I guess, a new candidate, which you can read about at Irish Breakdown. I'm like, man, I'm like, y'all haven't sent me anything all day, and now I sit down to have lunch, and I got all this stuff.
Of course. I'm doing my husbandly duties tomorrow when I get dragged to the fair.
Yeah, I'm gonna grill some steaks later tonight, so that'll be the last thing that I do today.
You the man.
Yep. So let's see if we got any more. Here's one from Jay Clampett, Vince.
All right, Jay Clampett Investments. Thanks for the super chat earlier, by the way. With the excitement of the 23 class, do you feel that pending the product on the field is adequate? The 24 class could really be a game changer.
I think yes. So he's saying pending what they do on the field this year.
Gotcha. Yes, absolutely.
With the excitement, pending profit. So to me, I think 22 was a needle-moving class. 21, the 21 class was a needle-moving class on offense. Tyler Buckner, Logan Diggs, Audric Estime, the three receivers that we love, Lorenzo Styles, Deion Colsey, Jaden Thomas. You got Kane Barong, Mitchell Evans. You got a pretty good offensive line class that was very top-heavy with Blake Fisher, Rocco Spiller, and then Joe Alt, who we thought had a high ceiling, has been much better than expected. Yeah. So that, to me, was a needle-moving offensive class. That was a gap-closing offensive class. The defense left something to be desired. You had some players we liked. Ryan Barnes we both like. You had Prince Collie that we both liked. There were some guys we liked, but it was kind of like, you had a lot of misses as well, Vince, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, your defensive line class, Jason Onye's a guy with the low floor, high ceiling. Gabriel Rubio's a kid with a high floor, I think, lower ceiling. Will Schweitzer was a bit of a project to have new pals train. I mean, there was a lot of misses. You missed on some linebackers after Prince Collie. The only other linebacker you signed is already gone because he's on a Mormon mission. It was just it wasn't quite where you wanted it to be. It was solid, but it wasn't on the level of the offense. Fast forward a year later, it's sort of the opposite now. You got a really good O-line class, and you got some good players. Aaron Price, very good player. Really liked the tight end class. You got Tobias Merriweather, very, very good player, but you were two guys short a receiver.
Oh yeah,
and the quarterback's a good, solid prospect, but you had a chance with Kay Klubnik and you didn't take it. You had a chance with Sam Horn. You chose not to take it. You were late getting on Drew Aller. And, now we're hoping that Steve Angeli's better than we think he is. We're hoping that a kid that's never thrown for more than 1,800 yards in high school can become a player that can lead a championship. Okay, great. Hopefully he does. Steve seems like a great kid. And I was busting his chops, Vince, at the Irish Breakdown, just having some fun. Mike Singer and I were walking next to each other, and Mike kind of made a comment because he knows how I feel about Steve. He made a comment about how great Steve is. And then Steve turns and I made a comment. I was like, calm down, Mike. It was the spring game. And then Steve smiled, because he knew we were having some fun with. Nice, really nice kid. And if he makes me look bad, great.
That's a great problem to have.
Right. Yeah. But, it wasn't that needle moving recruit. You're not getting kids to come to Notre Dame because you signed Steve Angeli.
Right.
Defensive class, different story. Yeah. Best linebacker class in the country. 2 excellent defensive linemen and another kid who isn't highly ranked, but he's better than his brother, and his brother was a 4-year starter at Notre Dame.
Yep.
Right? I mean,
he was the glue, right? I mean, he was a glue kid.
Right. And Donovan, I think Kurt will even probably tell you this. Donovan is a more athletic, productive player coming out than Kurt was. I don't know if he's as big as Kurt is going to be, but he was a better player than Kurt was. And then, of course, you came up short at safety, but part of that, and there's reasons why that you kind of get upset about, but the cornerback class was excellent. So it was a needle-moving defensive class, but offensively, you did have needle movers in some areas, but then you had some misses in others. It wasn't where it needed to be. It was a really good class, number 6 class, certainly a gap-closing class, but not to the level it should have been. Then you come to 2023. Now, they got to finish. Right? They've got to get to the 2 receivers we talked about, right? You've got to get Christian Gray. You've got to get, Jason Moore and Jaden Alsbury. Like, if you're able to get those guys, you got to get a quarterback somewhere, somehow. That is a big-time gap-closing class, Vince. But here's the thing. You can't just have one.
Right.
You got to – and this is the long-winded answer to get to where the question was. You can't just do it once, Vince. We just talked about Ohio State's receivers. It wasn't one class. It wasn't 2 classes. It was stacking those classes up year after year. What's made Bama the juggernaut? Bama won a title before they became this elite program. But they didn't win another. I mean, they won one in 11, but shouldn't have. To be honest with you, that team should have no business playing for championship that year. 2012 was a legitimate championship team, right? And then they kind of went on another stretch where they didn't win one after 2012 until 2015. Well, that's kind of about when they started really stacking up those classes, like really seriously back to back to back to back to back. And they started getting better play at quarterback.
Sure.
And so to me, you have to do it consecutively. And that's why, to me, the 2024 class could be huge. And here's the other part of it, Vince. As much, and I want to get your thoughts on this, as much excitement as there is in recruiting now, none of these kids have seen Marcus Freeman and this coaching staff coach a game together.
Absolutely.
Which could really hurt if it's not good. But if the product on the field is good, meaning like 11-1, and let's say you lose to Ohio State by a field goal, they score a touchdown late, it's a competitive 4-quarter game, and then you run the table. If those kids in 24 see Marcus Freeman and his staff that they can actually coach too, then yes, 24 will
be unbelievable.
Yes.
And to add all that, it's going to be Marcus Freeman's first full cycle as the head coach, where he's got say on both sides of the ball. Right. You know what I mean? Like, he's only been the head coach for 6 months, and the 23 class, obviously the hay wasn't in the barn yet, but the groundwork had already been done. He's been the head coach pretty much for the groundwork of the majority of the 24 class. And so you add that plus a 10-2, 11-1 competitive type season, it's going to be unbelievable, because now he's going to have that track record to talk about as well, to go along with his amazing recruiting and his staff's amazing recruiting. And depending on if he has to make any changes, guys leave, because that happens when you're successful, it's just going to build on itself. Mm-hmm. I mean, right now he's putting these classes together with 0 on the field track record, which I mean, is impressive. That's really impressive all by itself. You add on the field track record, forget about it. Forget about it. You're going to be turning guys away.
And what you're seeing too is in the 24 and 23 classes, there's 2 sort of Midwestern type areas that have to become the backbones of Notre Dame recruiting when it comes. And we've talked about this, it's Chicago and St. Louis and that Missouri area, because I think that's a place that can be favorable to Notre Dame. And Chicago, obviously, they're dipping into in the 24 class. If they're able to get Christian Gray, that's another kid from a great high school in the St. Louis area. Jeremiah loves a similar deal. Then if you can start, here's also why the 23 class is important, because there's some flat out dudes in those 2 areas next year.
Sure.
And there's some dudes in Texas. So if you can have success in Chicago and St. Louis, and Chicago already you're having 24, but in 23, if you can have some success in St. Louis, and Christian Brothers and DeSmet are 2 of the better teams in the state. If you're able to get those 2 kids, now all of a sudden, does that make the door easier or the path easier to go get Ryan Wingo next year, because you've opened that door? And one of the big questions we had when Jordan Johnson left was the way it was all handled. Would you be able to go back into DeSmet and get a kid? Right. That's another reason why Christian Gray would be big. Sure. So it's not just on the field that's going to impact next year. It's going to be, can you have success in Texas this year in a way that then makes it the path easier for a Micah Hudson and some of those guys next year? Can you have enough success in St. Louis? And they've already started to have some. Kyron Williams in 2019.
Sure.
You've had obviously Tyson Ford last year. You have Gabriel Ruba the year before that. If you can then go add some more skill to that, all of a sudden, does that make it easier to get Ryan Wingo? So it's on and off the field success, to me, Jay Clampett, that's going to potentially open that door for the 24 class to really be that talk about game changer. And I think it's got a chance to be that.
Sure.
In my opinion, there's no question. There's no question about it. Let's see if we love this. Thank you, Byron. Appreciate that.
It's got to love my IB Nation. Go Irish. Yes, sir, Byron. Thank you very much.
Yep. D Troll Hunter with super chat. Thank you, buddy, for the chocolate covered almond fun. Appreciate you. Appreciate you very much. Absolutely. Let's see here. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. This is I'll let you touch this one first.
Yeah. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop says, fun question. Do people spot you guys in public from YouTube? I'll talk for me. I would say more during the season, because more Notre Dame fans kind of converge on the campus. And so as I'm walking from my car to the stadium, I hear people yelling my name that I'd never met before in my life, which is surreal and weird and awesome all at the same time. I was driving into campus one day and I saw somebody I knew out the window, and then I kind of said, "Hey, what's up?" And then some other guy was like, "Irish breakdown!" Starts screaming like at the car. I'm like, "Yeah, all right, what's up, man?" Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of wild. I would say the local yokels don't necessarily. I a couple times, but probably
you've called me a few times at you were doing this score. You were doing the game.
Yeah.
And you said somebody came up to you.
I was doing a high school basketball game on the radio, and somebody was in the crowd, and I heard about it after the fact. He's like, "I saw you there." I was like, "Come up and say hi," you know? Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty cool and surreal at the same time.
I've never really been noticed until this past 5-6 months, really. But I wear my IB gear out in public too. Like, I think that's the only reason anyone's ever recognized me is because they see the IB gear. But like, the first time we were at Trader Joe's, and the guy checking, and this is right after the first time I'd shaved.
Yeah.
And so he didn't recognize me. He recognized the gear. He's like, "Irish breakdown." And then he looks at me and goes, "Are you?" I said, yeah, I am. I said, "I just shaved them." He's like, because he had just kind of started listening after the Brian Kelly thing. Very nice, very polite. That's
funny.
Just was really thankful. Said we loved the show and all that. Was walking out of Buffalo Wild Wings a couple months ago, and a guy came up and he's like, "Hey, are you Brian Driscoll?" And I was like, I want to be like, "Depends."
Yeah. What do you
like Brian Driscoll or not? So, but that was really nice. And then we had a guy. Remember the show? It was like back right before the spring game where I was like, I'm not talking about Dante Moore anymore, right? Some guy. We were at the place that used to be Scotty's Brew House. What's it like? Aspen something? New burger joint. I was there with Ryan Roberts and his family had come in town. So I met his dad and his wife that weekend. We're sitting there. Some guy comes up, he puts his arm, he goes, "Hey, I got a question about Dante Moore." And then he just smiles at me and then walks off. And so that was really cool. I just got a big kick out of that.
That's funny.
I wish he would have stayed because then I could have had some fun messing with him. But
that's funny. That's really funny.
It happens from time to time, but not a ton. And
it's very flattering.
It's
really cool.
It's kind of awkward because I'm like, who am I? Like, why,
Right.
But
exactly.
it's humbling. And I used to make fun of Loose Emoji because of how he would act when people would come up to him, like Lou's face turned around, he's like really embarrassed.
Everybody knows Lou.
Every game we're walking, somebody come up, talk to him, and Lou's like, "Why are they talking?" Like, for Lou, it was more like, "I'm nobody. Like, why does anybody care?" But like, I'm like, "Dude, you're the legend." And I used to make fun of how humbling it was for him because that never happened to me before.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Now I get it. It's like wow, like, we made enough of an impact where somebody recognized and felt the need to come up and say hi. So we actually appreciate it. I really do.
Big time.
So we're not one of those like, "Just leave me alone, let me eat my dinner."
If you see us walking around, man, say hi. I love it. I love seeing people.
And that's the kind of community we're trying to build,
right?
And
exactly.
That's why we do the tailgates and stuff like that, because we're we enjoy it. That's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build a family. We're trying to build a community, and that's the fun about it. So the last couple before we get out of here, Mark 1 super chat. There we go.
Much Mark. He says, question: what access does your team have to report on the Notre Dame football team? It's really good.
Everybody else. Yeah,
because I think a lot of people don't understand what our access actually is. I mean, your access sources. I mean, that's a big, as far as finding stuff out, especially this time of year.
Right.
But then once we get into the fall, when we get fall practice, we get a schedule and we know when all the practices are, and we get to go when they tell us we can go. And in the past, it's been about 5 out of 20-ish, give or take. Who knows?
We got the press conferences during the week, and then and all that. So we get the same access that everybody else gets when it comes to those type of things.
Right.
Obviously, we'll see if I'm able to be at games this year or not, but it has nothing to do with what some other clowns have reported. It has to do with a choice that I've made that is there's a requirement to be in the press box in Notre Dame that I'm not willing to make, and it is what it is. But my team was there, right? Like Vince was there, and Sean Davis was at one, and so and Mike was there, and then Sean Stiers is our new beat writer, so he'll be at games this year because they made their choice to do what was needed to be there, and totally respect that. It's just, and I made mine. So other people have lied about why I was in the games. They're clowns, and I don't care what they think anyway. But I'm hoping that changes. But like, for example, last week, all the media was allowed to sit down with one-on-ones with Marcus Freeman, and we were part of that. We got our half hour like everybody else had. So we get the same access everybody else has. The rest of it's like, how hard do you want to work? How hard do you want to work at cultivating sources and reputations with parents or players or coaches or the person who knows the person who knows this person, boosters, donors. Yeah. It's just how hard you want to work, and fortunately we've had some people that like the show that have become, people that kind of give us information, which we appreciate, but we also try to respect that. And a lot of times, if y'all knew how much information we got that we can't put out, but it's just like, hey, please don't say anything, because if you do, they're going to know where it came from. You know what I mean? So you try to respect that and honor that.
That information, while you're not allowed to give out specifics, it helps you formulate reasons for other things that are going on. You can kind of report that. So it's like the
Jadarian Price injury. We knew that the day it happened.
Right.
I had a source say, hey, just so you know, Jadarian Price tore his Achilles. So I think injuries need to be handled with care. You don't just go report something because some person told you. Right. So I did some digging. It felt like, this happened. I was able to confirm it. So then I talked to some folks in Notre Dame, said, hey, here's what I know. Let's figure this out. And so they don't like you to just run with injuries. They like it to be announced, and they want the kid to announce it. So what we agreed to do is, hey, can you just hold off until this date? And then they allowed us to break it before before they went public with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're doing that, if you're going to work with me on that, then I'll work with you.
Right.
On injuries. Now, there's other things I'm not asking for their blessing for, because they're not, I don't work for them. But there are some things where, and like, to me, that's cultivating a good relationship. Like, hey, look, I don't know if the kid's parents know yet. I don't know if you know what I mean? Like, am I going to report, hey, this kid got injured, and his mom's like, hold on a second, he hasn't even told me that yet. Like,
that's messed up.
And Notre Dame, that's where Notre Dame gets really ticked off. And so I'll work with them on that. But it's just about how hard you want to work and to cultivate sources. And it was harder for me the last 3-4 years. It was, because the guy in charge had made it known that he didn't want people talking to me. And I still did. I just had to work a little bit harder at it. And fortunately for now, a lot of the people that was the case for are gone.
One, and you were talking to are now in power.
So that helps, but
you know what I mean? Like, there's
the new staff doesn't have the same. This guy writes bad stuff about us. I mean, I've praised Tom Reese a lot the last 2 years. I've praised Coach Freeman. He's not going to tell his staff not to talk to me because of that. So, but at the same time, if it comes to that, because my audience is not Marcus Freeman and Tommy Reese and Al Golden, and it's y'all, and y'all are always going to get our honest stuff. So, so that's kind of that. That's an interesting way to end it. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Let me see if we got any more of these down here. Let's see. The rest is all I'm seeing right now is the Big Ten stuff. We're not gonna go there anyway.
Just yet. Eventually we will.
Well, we went there last week, but Saturday, Sean and I did, and we'll probably talk more about that this week, but I'm not really worried about today's going to be a recruiting show for the most part. So I appreciate this. So Vince, I think that's going to do it, man. I think it's going to do it. So why don't you go ahead and take us out of here, man?
Well, that is going to do it for this edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Make sure let me throw this away here. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, because you never know when there's going to be another.
That's right.
An announcement. Although we do know when there's going to be another one. It's tomorrow at 5 o'clock, or 5 o'clock Eastern time.
Yeah.
Make sure you tune in, because there will be a live Irish Breakdown show at that time. So
no afternoon show.
Correct.
Right? So no, and no IB Nation Sports Talk. The staff has tomorrow off. It's just going to be me and Sean tomorrow night, because Sean wants to be. I was going to do a solo show, but Sean wants to be because of Christian.
Sean Davis,
because of Christian. Yeah.
So make sure you tune in tomorrow at 5 o'clock, because that is the next time we'll be coming down your airwaves. If you're listening on the podcast, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. Share it with your friends. We'd really appreciate that as well. So thanks for hanging out with us. Happy 4th of July, everyone.
Message boards, sign up. I'm trying to give that creepy, sign up for the message boards. Yes. So that's what we do. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast. We'll talk to you again very soon.